we just give him a shout of praise in this place today? And then you guys can go ahead and grab a seat. My name is Bryant. I'm one of the pastors here on staff. And just so you know, I'm going to start out like this. So I'm going to be teaching you guys today. But Pastor Tad asked me to bring this table out here because I tend to ping pong back and forth. And so I'm going to try my best to make this my home base today. But just brace yourselves because it might not happen that way, okay? Anyway, I'm one of the pastors here on staff. And for those of you who do know me, you know that this actually makes me feel incredibly uncomfortable to be up here right now, to be doing this. But listen, I love our church, I love Jesus, and I love our pastors. So this is me putting my yes on the table today. So enjoy, okay? So, but listen, there's a lot of things that I do. So like I have a note in my phone. And in my note on my phone, what I end up doing is I jot down a bunch of different things that maybe stand out to me. If somebody speaks something, if I'm reading something in my quiet time, I'll just pull out this note in my phone and I'll jot it down for moments just like this where I might be asked to come up and talk about something. So today is kind of a hybrid of two different things. This is something that I read in Mark chapter 5 a few years ago that jumped out at me. And then something that Pastor Tad said just a few weeks ago in our Proverbs series that we were in. And so I want to jump right in today. Let's start with the question that Pastor Tad asked just a couple weeks ago in our series. And he said this: why do you trust God with your eternity, but you struggle to trust him in your finances? Right? And so we're not going to dive into finances today, but the premise of this is still the same. And so I want to kind of start with the concept of what he's talking about right here. And so I'm going to ask a few more questions, and it's something like this. Why do we trust God with our eternity, but we panic when our plans start to fall apart? Right? Or why do we trust God with our eternity, but we worry ourselves sick when we don't have control anymore? We start to lose control, right? Or we trust God with our eternity, but we refuse to trust him with our kids, or we won't trust him with our calling, or we try to fix our own sufferings, our own anxiety, our own struggles on our own, right? So I have a question here today. How many of us like to have control? All right, put your hands down. I have another question. Raise your hand if your spouse should have raised their hand, but they did not raise their hand just now. I'm just curious in the room. All right, so, but this is kind of the concept of what we're talking about is, listen, we trust God with the biggest thing imaginable, right? Like our eternity. We trust him with that. But at the same time, we don't trust him with what today holds, right? Like we won't trust him with our decisions today. And listen, it's not because we don't believe in God. It's because self-reliance a lot of times feels a lot safer than surrender, right? And so this is what I want to do. We're going to talk about a character in the Bible. We're going to be teaching out of Mark chapter 5 today. We're going to start in verse 35. So if you want to go ahead and get there in your Bibles. But I'm going to give a little bit of backstory. So in Mark chapter 5, we find in verse 21, we're introduced to this man named Jairus. And so Jairus is a local synagogue leader there in Capernaum, and his daughter is dying, right? So he goes and finds Jesus. Jesus has been out doing all these miracles. Jairus hears of this. He goes and finds Jesus and falls down at Jesus' feet and begs him to come to his home so that he can heal his daughter. He believes that if Jesus would just touch his daughter, that she would be healed, right? So he goes to find Jesus. He begs him to come with him, and Jesus agrees to go. And so on the way kind of from where Jesus is to Jairus' house, can you imagine just for a second, Jairus is trying to get Jesus to go to his house as quickly as possible. Like, can you sense the urgency a little bit? Like your daughter is dying. You found the solution. You found the healer, and you cannot get him to your house quick enough, right? So he's trying to get Jesus to his house as quickly as he can. No distractions. And there's a crowd of people that start kind of pressing in. They're following Jesus, right? Because they've also heard the same thing. So they're pressing in. They're starting to follow Jesus. And then there's a woman. Now, again, you're Jairus. You're in his shoes. You're trying to have no distractions. You're trying to get Jesus to your house as quickly as possible. Then there's a woman who's been bleeding for 12 years. right? It says that she sold everything she had. She spent all the money that she had and gave it to the doctors, all these different doctors and physicians to try to heal her, and it's only made it worse. And so she believes if she can get to Jesus and just touch his robe, that she'll be healed. So she presses in amongst the crowd. She touches Jesus. He immediately feels the power leave him. He turns around and starts talking to her. Now, I don't know about you, but if I'm Jairus, I'm thinking, really? Right now, this is the time that we're gonna stop in the street and have a conversation with a random woman. Now listen, I know that sounds kind of messed up because you would wanna celebrate with her a little bit, but remember, his daughter's dying, right? You're trying to get there as fast as you possibly can. So you would wanna celebrate, but really in the back of your mind, you'd be like, yeah, that's awesome. Let's move on, let's keep going, right? Let's keep going. So that's kind of the backstory. We're gonna pick up our story here in Mark 5, chapter 5, verse 35. And it says this: while he was still speaking to her, while Jesus was still speaking to the woman, messengers arrived from the home of Jairus, the leader of the synagogue. They told him, your daughter is dead. There's no use in troubling the teacher now. So translation, leave him alone. It's over, it's too late, right? She's already dead, it's final. She's gone. But listen, Jesus overheard what they said to Jairus, and he turned to Jairus and he said, don't be afraid, just have faith. Then Jesus stopped the crowd and wouldn't let anyone go with him except for Peter, James, and John. Then they came to the home of the synagogue leader. Jesus saw much commotion and weeping and wailing, right? Then he went inside and he asked, why all this commotion and weeping? The child isn't dead, she's only asleep. And the crowd laughed at him. Now listen, I know this sounds kind of weird. Back in the day, there were people called actually like professional mourners. I don't know what the actual term for them were, but they were like, think about the most dramatic person that you know. And there was a whole bunch of them together, and they would like go to people's houses that died, right? And they would make just a big dramatic scene about all of it. So there's really no emotional attachment to this little girl. They probably didn't even know this little girl, but there's a bunch of people there, lots of commotion, lots of drama, lots of weeping. So it says the crowd laughed at Jesus, but he made them all leave. He took the girl's father, the girl's mother, and the 3 disciples in the room where the girl was laying. This is where I want to kind of draw a distinction in the story a little bit, is why them? Why the 3 disciples? Why Peter, James, and John? Why not the entire crowd? Or why not at least all 12 of the disciples, right? Like Jesus clears the noise. He keeps the little girl's parents and 3 disciples. And they go into the house. He clears everyone else out. So just to recap, the crowd laughed, right? They had already decided what was possible. They had already decided the little girl was dead. That was it was over, right? But Peter, James, and John stayed close because they didn't have all the answers. They didn't even know what Jesus was about to do, but they had enough faith to know that Jesus could do something, right? They didn't know what was about to happen. They didn't have all the answers, but they had seen miracle after miracle. They had heard him teach. They had seen him move, right? And now they might not know how the story would end, but they did know that they were close enough to the man that could make a difference in the story, right? They were close enough to the one that could actually do something about it. So they stayed close. Listen, it's the same house, the same dead little girl, but it's 3 disciples with a different posture, right? So listen, I want you to write this down today. There's a difference between understanding everything and understanding who has the power to do anything. So you don't have to have all the answers. You just have to believe. You just have to trust and have faith in the one who has the answers, right? So listen, the crowd stood outside evaluating. The 3 stood inside expecting what Jesus was about to do. And sometimes the only thing that's separating us from a move of God, from experiencing a move of God, is whether or not we're staying close enough when it doesn't make sense, right? All right, so listen, Jesus says, she's not dead. The crowd laughs. What does Jesus do? He puts all the people out. They're saying it's over. He pushes them all out, right? And then in verse 41, it says, he took the little girl by the hand. He said to her, little girl, I say to you, get up. And immediately the girl stood up and began to walk. So I just want to be really clear about this. Like, Jesus didn't have to clear the room to do the miracle, right? He didn't have to push everybody out to do the miracle. But I do believe that Jesus was trying to teach us something. He was trying to draw a line about what faith really does look like. See, here's what I want to do really quick. I want to kind of break this story down into two different pieces, right? Two different kinds of people in this story. And it's those that are standing in the room and then those that Jesus sent out of the room. And it's not good or bad or right or wrong. It's just about those who had unwavering faith and those who doubted, right? So I want you to write this down just really quick. Inside the room means trusting Jesus before you see the outcome. Outside the room means waiting to trust until it makes sense. Guys, that's hard. Because sometimes we, like, in our analytical brains, right, in our humanistic nature, we want to know what's going to happen before we say yes, right? Before we jump all in, we got to know. So listen, I want to tell you how this hits home for me just a little bit. So for me, when I was 17 years old, my youth pastor came up to me just randomly one time. His name was Donnie Strader. And he came up to me randomly one time at church, and he said, Bryant, I had a dream last night. I had this vision from God, and you're supposed to be a worship pastor. Now, listen, guys, I didn't even know what that meant, okay? So, like, I had been going to church for like 3 years, okay? And the church that I was going to, we had like a choir, right? And then like on a really rowdy Sunday, we had like a quartet that would come up and do like a song. Like before the message, it was like the special music. You know what I'm talking about? That's the context of what I grew up in. I had no idea what he was even talking about. But he believed in it so much that this was his faith step, right? He came and told me about it first. That got kind of weird. Second of all, he came and picked me up one day and he took me to a place called Guitar Center in Greensboro. He walked me into that place, into their guitar room, and he said, I want you to pick out any guitar in here. I'm going to buy it for you today. Now listen, I didn't even know how to play guitar. Yeah, this is crazy. I didn't even know how to do it. So how many of us remember the Wow CDs? Do we remember this? Like the Wow greatest hits? Listen, I might be aging myself out here. Okay, listen, there used to be these things called compact discs, right? And you would have to put them in a thing called a CD player, and you could listen to those. But if you bought the deluxe version of this, it would also come with a DVD that you could watch. And that's a whole other thing before streaming and all this. But what I did to learn how to play guitar, I actually grabbed the DVD, and I put it in the DVD player, and I would watch these people play their songs. And I would just rewind it, and I would pause it, and I would see how their hands were, and then I would try to copy it, and that's honestly how I learned how to play guitar. This was before YouTube. We didn't even have YouTube then, okay? I just had the Wow DVDs. That's what we did. That's how we started, okay? But anyway, all I had to say, he kind of put this calling on my life. He said, listen, I know this sounds crazy to you, but I believe this is what you're supposed to do. And I took that seriously. So I began to kind of learn how to play guitar. I started leading worship at our youth group. I started leading worship at this other church out in Gibsonville. And I say that to say that, like, look, several years went by. And what ended up happening was I graduated from high school. I was in college, and I was going to college I wanted to be an architect. I was going in for architectural design. And my sophomore year in college, I started working for a general contractor who was building custom homes out in like the northern Guilford area out in Guilford County. And I started making really good money, guys. I'm gonna talk about some stuff that maybe makes us feel a little bit uncomfortable, but I'm gonna say it anyway, all right? But I started making really good money with this guy. A couple more years go by, and he had moved me from I was running one of his framing crews just because I knew how to read blueprints. And I went from that to like his main project manager and started making really good money doing that, okay? And when I say really good, I'm 24 years old, and I'm like, man, I'm killing it right now. We're doing a really, really, really good job raking in the cash, okay? So listen, me and my wife got married, and we decided that we were gonna go try to find a church together that we could go worship at together. And through a series of events, I met a guy who was playing bass here on this stage at a church that was called Brookwood Church back in the day. And I ran across this guy, and he said, hey, I just need to let you know that since you and your wife are looking for a church, our church just lost their worship pastor. They might need some help. So I was like, cool. So I rang the doorbell out here on this step one Monday morning and was like, hey, I'm just a local guy. I lead worship some. I do this thing. I'll have another job. I'm not really looking for a job, but I would love to help if you need something. Their pastor came down to talk to me, and he immediately was like, hey, guess what? We don't have anyone to lead worship next weekend. Would you do that? I was like, sure, I'll come in and do that. And then they took me out to lunch right after that Sunday, and they offered me a full-time job here being the worship pastor at Brookwood Church. And that sounds really, really awesome, and it sounds fun and all that stuff, until they slid a little piece of paper over to me and said, this is what we can offer you to do that, okay? It was less than 20% of what I made the year before, okay? But I said yes on the spot because I remembered the calling, right? And listen, that's not the thing that people want to talk about. I know it makes people feel uncomfortable. No one gets into ministry for the money, okay? It doesn't happen that way. But then I had to go home and tell my wife what I had done, right? We had been married for 4 months, okay? She didn't even have a job yet. She was still trying to graduate from college. And I went home and I told her what I had done and that we were probably gonna have to move in with her parents for a little bit, right? We were gonna need to save some money and do that. But I say that to say, listen, I would love to say that everything was like unicorns and rainbows after that everything worked out, it was beautiful, and God just provided for our every need and all that, and all those things did happen. But I will say this too, when you take a step towards surrender, sometimes the pressure often increases before the peace settles in, right? So like when you're playing it safe, the enemy doesn't panic, right? But he starts pushing back real hard when you start taking faith steps, right? When you start stepping into your calling and what God's actually put you here to do, the enemy gets really scared. So listen, that very same night that I said yes, the very same night, I ended up at Alamance Regional Hospital. And it was a long series of the next 5 or 6 years where I was struggling with anxiety and depression and all the things, all the voices in my mind that I couldn't get out of my mind saying, you're not good enough. Why are you even doing this? Right? So that night I was having panic attacks. I'd never had panic attack before. So I had a panic attack that very night, rightly so. Now that I'm looking back on it, I'm like, okay, yeah, it makes sense now. But started having panic attacks and all those things. And I can just say this though, the thing that kept me so grounded was that I had seen Jesus do too much in my life, right? That I had experienced him. He had saved me time and time and time again. Listen, I have a whole rocky past that I don't have time to get into today. But there were so many times that Jesus came through and he saved me and he pulled me through. And I knew this too, that I believed in the depths of my soul that Jesus was the Son of God. First of all, he said he was who he said he was. That he died on a cross for my sins. That he went into a tomb, the tomb was sealed, and then he walked out of that tomb, right? And so that is the foundation of my faith. And when I measured that against the problems that I had in this world, there was nothing that I was going through that was bigger than the empty tomb, right? There was nothing that I was gonna walk through that was gonna make me doubt whether or not he was gonna pull me through, because he had already pulled through the ultimate sacrifice and the ultimate achievement of defeating death, right? So how was I gonna doubt what he was actually gonna do in my life, right? So I believed it and I stepped into it. So this is what I wanna say today, though. This is what I'm trying to say, and I want you to write this down, is that resurrection faith changes everything. And what do you mean by resurrection faith? I mean this, that Jesus was declared dead. He was buried. He was sealed in a tomb. And 3 days later, he walked out. Does that sound familiar at all? So in Mark chapter 5, they said, this little girl is dead, right? In Luke 23, they said that Jesus breathed his last breath, right? And in both cases, they were wrong, right? So the resurrection of Jesus is the foundation of our faith in him. And we don't just trust Jesus blindly. We trust him because the resurrection really happened and he is who he says he is. Do y'all believe that this morning? That, listen, because of that, there's nothing in this world that can be bigger than that, right? Are y'all tracking with me? Y'all tracking with me? All right, come on. So listen, are you still living life like you're standing inside the room expecting a miracle and trusting Jesus will move? Are you living your life standing outside the room trying to make sense of everything that's happening? Justifying your doubts, believing what seems logical rather than what God has promised. See, standing in the room, it's not about understanding everything. It's about surrender. It's about faith. It's about believing that the resurrection is real. And if the resurrection is real, then what should we fear? Why should we be reluctant about anything? So sometimes, listen, I just have to say this out loud, and I'm gonna step on some toes real quick, okay? And I don't mean to, but it's all right. That's what we come to church for, right? So sometimes standing outside the room, looking in, seems really spiritual. And I say that because, listen, this is a lot of the things that now listen, I'm a little bit of, I'm what they call an activator. Like sometimes I'll just dive headfirst into stuff and I don't fully understand it. Call it faith, I don't know. I'm choosing to call it faith, okay? But listen, sometimes standing outside the room seems super spiritual because you'll start saying things like, oh, I'm just trying to be wise about this, right? Or I'm waiting on clarity for this. Or I need confirmation about this, right? These are all the things that we say to ourselves, right? If it's his will, he'll just make it happen, right? But listen, this is what I want us to understand today. Wisdom is real. It is a real thing. But sometimes what we call wisdom is just fear dressed up in its Sunday best, right? Just a little bit of fear. And it's like, I'm not going to give into it. I'm a little bit scared, but I don't want to say that, so I'm going to make a bunch of other excuses, right? Sometimes I'm waiting on God actually just means I don't want to risk looking foolish, right? How do you think I felt when I went home and told my wife what I had done? I felt a little bit foolish, right? But it's okay. So Peter, James, and John, listen, they stepped into rooms where things didn't make sense. And sometimes faith will make you look foolish to the crowd, right? But the crowd didn't get to see the miracle. See, faith is trusting when you can't see the end. Even when you think you have a clear picture, sometimes faith means letting go and trusting God for something different than what you see, right? So think about this. Like if death is the most permanent thing that we know, and Jesus walked out of the grave, then why are we still standing outside the room staring at the one thing that feels overwhelming to us right now? We're standing outside the room and we refuse to give it to God. We're still trying to control it. We're still trying to make sense of it instead of just giving it to him. The anxiety, right? The tension in your marriage, the diagnosis, the dream that feels dead, right? The step towards a calling that maybe God has put on your life, that's a big one, right? The conversation with somebody who may need to know the hope of Jesus, someone who you may need to invite to Easter this year. All of those things can't even come close to being as big as the empty tomb, right? So listen, I was challenged today with delivering a short message because we have some stuff going on right after the service today that we're going to talk about in just a minute. But listen, I know that faith is hard. Like sometimes when we want to control things, it's really hard to let them things go, right? When we have self-reliance instead of surrender, it's really hard to let those things go. But listen, maybe there's something in your life today that you need to release. Maybe there's something that you've been kind of sitting on. You refuse to take a step towards it because you're waiting on clarity. You're waiting to have all the answers. You're waiting until it makes sense. It may not ever make sense, okay? But listen, if that's you today, I just want us to, as a room together, I want us to step fully into whatever door that God may be opening for us. Whatever thing that may be in our life that seems so big that we can't let go. I want us to just take a big step together today as one room, one church, and just move towards Jesus together, trusting him. Listen, do you trust him with the thing that keeps you up at night? The thing that you're trying to fix on your own? Listen, we try to fix a lot of stuff on our own, right? Let me just ask, like, how's that working out for you? Right? What are you still holding on to that you try to fix time and time and time again, but it keeps coming back? It's still keeping you up at night. This is what I want to do. If everybody would just go ahead and stand up right here in the room today. We're going to actually close this down. I know this is early, but it's good, right? We're going to shut this down, but not shut this down. That's not what we want to do. We want to welcome God to move in our lives. We want to welcome Holy Spirit to reveal to us this morning, what are the things? What are the things that you need to trust him with? Our prayer team's going to be available. Listen, we're going to take the time over this next song. Come and pray. Maybe you need to see a miracle in your life. Maybe this morning it's just surrender. Maybe we're asking him for both of those things today. Listen, I'm going to pray for us. We're going to sing a song together. Prayer team's available. Let's just go ahead and pray. God, we thank you so much. God, we thank you, God, that we can have faith and we can have trust in you. God, because of the resurrection of Jesus, God, that we can look back over our lives, God, we can see where you've moved time and time and time and time again. God, every miracle in our life, God, every step of faith, God, you've blessed it. God, you've been there. God, even when it doesn't make sense, God, help us to discern today, God, where you're calling us, where you're moving us. God, the conversations that we may need to have. God, the people that we may need to invite to meet Jesus. God, the calling on our life. God, we just surrender ourselves to you today, God. Help us to make just a giant step of faith towards you today. God, we love you so much, God. Stir in our hearts, God, move in us today. We love you. Amen.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We hope that you gained something from this content, that it helps you to follow, to grow, and to live for Jesus. We drop new content just like this every Monday morning, so we want to invite you back. And the best way to do that is to follow, like, and subscribe on whatever platform you're watching to stay connected to everything we have going on here at Hope Church.